Hi, everyone, and welcome to Your Nurse Voice Matters. And I've got health coach Joff here today with me to share a little bit about what he's doing, which is pretty exciting. So, welcome, Joff. Nice to have you on board.
Thank you so much, Wendy, for having me here.
You're more than welcome. We actually discovered leading into the podcast that we've met a few years ago on our paths. The
Yes.
nursing circles are a bit like that. What goes around comes around.
Yes, it's quite interesting. I was looking for nursing podcasts and I saw your face in one of the I don't know if it was a Facebook advertisement or if it was a post, and I thought, I know this lady. So I thought I listened to a few of your podcasts and I thought this is something that we need in the nursing world. It's amazing.
Absolutely. Advocacy for nurses is always a good thing. So, Joff, I know a little bit about your background,
Yeah.
certainly from meeting you previously and also our discussion in the last couple of weeks, but our audience doesn't know anything about you. So, can you share with us, what your background is and what you're currently doing, which is pretty exciting?
Yes. So thank you again, Wendy, for having me on. My name is Joff, spelled Joff, and I am a registered nurse. I've been a registered nurse for since 2011. So it's about nearly 15 years. And I've primarily worked in rehabilitation, subacute, and acute stroke for most of my career. But I've dabbled in a few areas in nursing. Right now I am also doing health coaching on the side to try and help nurses with their metabolic health and weight loss because which we'll probably get into. I've experienced for myself a huge transformation with my own weight loss and metabolic health, and I can see that within the industry, this is much needed, and a lot of people are looking for ways to, lose weight, feel energized, and just be generally healthy. So that's me in a nutshell, really.
Nice, nice. And we see it all the time, don't we? We deliver a lot of healthcare to our clients and we give them a lot of education, but sometimes we need to look inwards about all these secret sources and sort of be a role model for our patients. Certainly
Yeah.
when I wrote Midlife Mojo, the first book, that was my epiphany was, I was actually becoming one of the patients that I was trying to teach in my PT classes, so hence
Right.
why Midlife Mojo came about. And nurses are a particular sort of, gosh, they've got so many things happening in their lives to
Yes.
try and juggle to get that what you call metabolic balance correct. What are some of the things or some of the challenges that you see that nurses, struggle with when they're trying to get their health in check?
Well, if we look at it in a general sense, being in a healthcare environment like a hospital isn't going to be the best thing for your metabolic health. For one, you're doing shift work, so um, the exposure to all sorts of working hours during the day and the disruption of your circadian rhythm, that's going to play a huge part that I don't think a lot of people take into consideration. But not even just that, but the foods that you're eating, which most people eat, regardless of whatever profession they're in or trade, it is going to be a lot of it is foods that disrupt your metabolism. A lot of processed food, junk foods, and yeah, just really carb rich foods that make it very hard for people to lose weight and to be generally healthy. Nurses aren't immune to that because, as we know, being a nurse, you encounter patients or clients, residents. They have family members that bring in treats to say thank you. Um, and that's just one example. You've also got colleagues that will bring in, very nice foods just to get you through the shift. Now, again, we could go on and on and on, but there are so many things, so many barriers that get in the way of metabolic health that I think, it's hard to pinpoint on one thing. So that's
Mm.
why I think having someone as an advocate to really find things and try to overcome these barriers that we go through as nurses is quite important. And I didn't mention as well, um, you know, the stresses that you get from work. The workload itself is quite stressful, and it all plays into hormones, which trickle down to weight gain and metabolic health. So yeah, there's a lot of things, Wendy. A lot of things.
There's a lot of stresses in nursing, and I'm actually trying to pull the next series together around the stresses in nursing.
Mm,
We don't really talk about issues in nursing upfront and open, and I'm trying to
mm,
kind of open the conversation with that. Um, and I'll give you, a few examples. Bullying, horizontal violence, the pressure
yes,
under the medical team for timelines or priorities or all those sort of things, and managing that within your own capabilities can be sometimes quite stressful for nurses.
yes,
Expectations in the workplace of yourself and of others can be quite stressful. There's a lot of things there that can cause an extra stress on you. Our biggest stress is that we just put this on ourselves.
we do,
Yes,
we
we
do.
do. And we have high expectations, and the community has high expectations of the care that is delivered. I know if I had my mother, father, brother, sister in healthcare, I'd want them to receive, the very best that we can. And the
Yeah.
thing is, if we can't deliver exceptional care if we don't look after ourselves
Mm,
first. Yes. So
mm,
what kind of prompted you to head into this direction? I know you're still working as a nurse, but you're
yes,
developing this outside of your work.
yes.
Yes. So what actually prompted you? Was there anything significant that happened, or what did you see? Or just explain a little bit about what the pivot point was for you.
So the pivot point, I guess, to really narrow it down and to make it concise, I went through my own personal health journey. I was one of those people who, became quite overweight as the years progressed in nursing. And just a little bit of a backstory. My health journey sort of coincides with my career because I started off nursing at a young age. I was 17 when I studied, straight out of high school, did my bachelor's of nursing, and getting into my clinical placements, I got a blood test done, and the doctors weren't too happy with my metabolic markers, my lipids, and that started me off in a bit of a, oh, I've actually got to be healthy. I had it on my mind that I've got to, lead by example. If I'm going to be looking after people, I've got to be somewhat, reflective of good health, if you want to put it that way. And so my whole mindset throughout my, going into my 20s, leading to my 30s was I've got to be as healthy as possible. I had it in my mind that nursing was going to be stressful just from what I've heard from colleagues, friends, and family. And I knew that shift work was going to take a toll on me. But I just didn't know how much of a deal it was going to, make for me personally. But yes, I started to become quite overweight straight after I started doing nursing. So as soon as I became a registered nurse, I fell into some pretty bad patterns early on. Junk food, you know, that was a key thing for me. I used food a lot to cope. And I don't think a lot of people or nurses talk about it, but I always just kept it to myself. I thought it was a normal thing to binge eat after a shift, to stop by at, the local service station or a McDonald's after a shift. I thought it was just, it's fatigue. It is a normal thing. But now that I reflect back at it, there were, it was being a young nurse and trying to, I guess, live up to the expectations and to try and, number one, land a job,
Mm.
because at that time I could not get a permanent nursing job. I could not get a permanent contract. So I was, you know, pushing myself to the extremes of, being, on top of my game, being, prompt in and being early to my shifts, just trying to be a good, nurse. But at the same time, I didn't realize how much stress that really
Mm.
played in, my physical and mental health. So yes, bad habits started early on in my career. Um, I started, using alcohol as well to help with the, I guess you could say, a coping mechanism.
Mm.
So that didn't help either. And trying to, deal with shift work was, again, that I knew that was going to be a challenge, but I didn't realize that I'd be taking benzodiazepines to try and help me sleep. And
Mm.
so, yes, fast forward a little bit. Every year I went back to the doctors. The GP would always say, would always prompt me and say, "Look, your bloods haven't changed much. Would you consider going on medications?" Until I got to my late 30s, um, I could really tell the difference in with my health. I was experiencing symptoms of heart disease, which was very scary, up to a point where I'd be, on my during my shift. I remember one time I was on a shift, on a morning shift, and I had to just leave because I honestly felt like I was having a heart attack.
Mm.
I had my blood pressure at the time was at 180 systolic, and keep this in mind, like I'm I was about 27, 28 at the time, and it was quite scary.
Mm.
I deal with patients all day with hypertension, with a lot of these issues, and I thought I'm not far off. I'm not far off from this at all. So, you know, um, that spiraled me down into, I've got to do something about it. So
Yeah.
I gave into, let's just go down the route of pharmaceuticals because, I got to get on top of it fast.
Mm.
But in the back of my mind, I always thought, there's got to be more to it than
Yeah.
just medications. Lifestyle has to be a huge part into it. So looking into lifestyle, I came across the low carb down under channel on YouTube, which was, a channel about, low carb diets, ketogenic diets. And I decided to just give it a go because why not? I've followed the advice of my GP. I've seen dietitians. I've done the stock standard advice of following what they say, and it just wasn't working. So let's do this low carb thing, which I thought was crazy because, well, I've always thought that carbohydrates were such a huge part in, providing us with energy.
Mm.
Carbs, you need sugar. And so I was a bit fearful getting into this new diet, but I gave it a go and it actually, wow, it hit me straight away. The energy, it gave me so much energy. It helped me lose a little bit of weight. And the more I looked into it, you know, uh, a lot of the foods that I was eating, the processed junk, the carb-rich foods, um, they were, I believe, to be the root issue of my problems. And so, the further and further I gone down, I started cutting more carbs out of my diet, and I started to feel great. So I found this thing called the carnivore diet, which was pretty much an extreme version, if you'd like to say it that way, of a ketogenic diet. And I decided to give that a go, and my health improved drastically. Um, so throughout the span of a year, from going low carb to all the way carnivore, I lost about 40 kilos of total body weight.
Wow.
Um, I've improved all signs and symptoms of heart disease that I was experiencing. Um, the doctors were happy. I was happy. I was feeling great. And I got off my medications. So that is what prompted me to feel like I've got to tell the world because this is, I know this is just my story, but I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. I hear the same stories with nurses, with doctors, people that work in healthcare that go through the same thing. Diets are the number one topic you hear in the staff room. It's always about what diet are you doing today, or how many calories are you on, and it's a never ending conversation that goes on
Mm.
in the workplace. So I thought, gosh, I've got to tell people this. And at first, I thought, let's just see what it's like to go on social media. I'd never done anything like this. I'd never exposed myself and told my story to anyone. And lo and behold, I got on social media, and so many people, commented, gave me support. I didn't get the backlash that I thought I would.
Mm.
Um, Eating a diet that seems to be quite extreme for a lot of people. In fact, more people were curious about it, and what was even more exciting to me was uh, nurses were
Mm.
excited about it, and so I
Mm.
thought, gosh, I think this will help a lot of people, and I know that it is going to be a tough thing to crack for a lot of people because it's giving up a whole food group or cutting out certain foods that provide you with comfort and that you use to deal with things like burnout. That is going to be a hard challenge, but I want to help people with that, and
Mm.
so I decided to become a health coach.
Mm.
um, so yeah, that's really
That's
where
the
it's
story.
landed me today.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing all of that, Joff. And, that's quite remarkable. Congratulations on achieving such a great milestone in your health and recognizing too that you needed to do something. I think accepting that something has to change is a key mindset shift for a lot of people, and a lot of
Yes.
people ignore those signals. I'm guilty of it myself. And to actually acknowledge that and move forward and find something that's actually worked for you is quite remarkable. And wow, 40 kilograms, it'd be nice to see a before and an after shot of you, of what you look like and what you look like now, because you certainly look the picture of health. You've got lovely skin and, well proportioned features on what I can see on the Zoom here. So
Thank you.
congratulations, and very inspirational. And I'm sure that a lot of, as you say, coffee room chats are
Mm.
around around
Yes.
around eating, and we all know that yes, our patients and clients give us so many goodies,
Yes.
especially around seasonal activities such as Christmas. It's really interesting how they show appreciation and gratitude. So
Yes.
thank you for sharing all of that. I guess for our viewers, what's the number one key tip that you would give someone who can recognize in themselves that they're probably in a similar situation?
Mm.
What is one key thing that you could give as a word of advice for them with regards to their health and choices?
Look, I think I only speak on experience with this, but I had I guess, I had a why and a reason why I wanted to change my health around.
Mm.
And so that was the base of what I needed. It was a motivation to say, I've got to do something about this. And I really like how you put it, because yes, it was the switch that I needed to move forward. And I see a lot of people stuck in that zone because I think most people know themselves what you shouldn't be doing and what you should be doing, what is considered healthy, what's considered not healthy for the most part. Or not necessarily to have the answers, but to know that, I don't feel great. But I guess having a reason why you want to break through that is going to be most important. So I always tell, I always ask my clients during our first initial call, why do you want to do this? Why is it that you want to lose weight? So I think that is key to getting started in, you know, moving forward and improving your health. Does that sort of answer the question,
Yeah,
Wendy?
it does. I mean, you need to anchor something, you need to anchor onto something as a reason why you want to do anything, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, I talk about big whys in Midlife Mojo,
Mm,
getting your big reason why you get up in the morning
yes.
to be able to do what you need to do. And everyone's why is different. And it's
Yes.
just tapping into that. And it's not a superficial why. It has to be a deep-seated, um, big I'm going to swear a little bit, big ass why to get out there in the world because unless you kind of kick yourself up the rear end, then nobody else is going to do that for you. So yeah,
Right.
and to be able to do that and anchor that onto something is it takes a lot of courage to do that. Yeah, 100%. So,
Mm.
Joff, if anyone was wanting to make contact with you, what's your best point of contact? And we'll include that in the podcast brief that we put up.
Yeah, so I've got multiple ways you can contact me. The best way right now is my Instagram account. That seems to be where I spend most of my time on social media. But I also have a website, um, which is healthcoachjoff.com.au. I should also just mention I'm on most platforms on social media under the same name, Health Coach Joff. So if you search that even on Google, I'll come up.
You'll come up. You'll come up everywhere. That's awesome. It's nice to have those point of contacts. And what sort of stuff are you putting out on Instagram so we can be prepared? You doing
Well,
anything? Instagram's such a wonderful platform. Yeah.
yes, yes, I'm learning the ropes on Instagram. Right, look, right now it's more about educational posts, really, about diet and lifestyle, and I've tailored it in a way to suit, or I guess that's translatable to nurses, how it relates to them. So yeah, I put up quick reels, quick posts. Sometimes it's educational, sometimes it's me sharing my own personal experience. But for yeah, that's my general gist of what I post on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. Nice. Awesome. So before we sum up and say goodbye, what sort of take-home message would you like to give for our nurses that are listening?
Yeah, I think m- look, the biggest thing that I always tell nurses is just to keep an open mind and to also question and don't be afraid to do your own self research if things aren't working. I wouldn't have gotten to a point where I wanted to do something about it or to actually do something if I didn't act like a madman online and just started searching. I could have gone the route of just sticking to what I was being told by the doctors, and just continue with medications, or I could have, or yeah, I took the decision to take into my hands, and control my narrative. And so I think that's where it all starts. You've got to start taking control because it can feel like things are out of your control, especially being a nurse. The one thing that I've recently started reflecting on is burnout. And I didn't realize, I always thought burnout was this emotional thing where, you know, is one event or one moment where you just, oh, you've got to take stress leave or you've got to take time off work. But it didn't occur to me that burnout happens over a period of time and it doesn't have to show up in your emotions. It shows up physically as well. And so that's one thing that I want to be doing moving forward is just to talk more about burnout, nursing burnout, and to talk about how it affects your health because some of these things you might not pick up, like you know, like I mentioned, stopping by the service station after work and just getting Krispy Kreme donuts. I thought it was a normal thing, and I thought this is just me refueling myself, but I look back at it, I think, wow, every time I had a bad day at work, it was a habit. 7-Eleven, Krispy Kreme donuts. But, yeah, so those are the things that I want to focus on for my social media platforms. And yeah, if you have any questions or if you are curious about the low carb, ketogenic, or carnivore diets, please reach out.
Mm.
I'm not saying it's for everyone,
Mm.
but it's what worked for me, and
Yeah.
I know that worked a lot for many other people, including nurses. So
Yes. Yeah. Beautiful. All right, Jeff. So it's been great to have you on today, and thank you for sharing to our community, what brought you and led you to where you are now. I know that took, as I said before, a lot of courage to do that.
thank
But
you.
by showing your and sharing your vulnerability to our community, um, makes other people feel safe and acknowledge, what's actually happening with them as well. So for the listeners out there that don't make themselves known to us, I know in my heart that the content of all of these podcasts are actually going to be touching and reaching nurses now and into the future. So thank you for being a part of that. I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Mhm. All right, everyone. So you've been listening to Your Nurse Voice Matters. And if you've got a story to tell, if you've got a nursing issue that you're wanting to discuss on the air so that we can open things up to other nurses, then feel free to reach out back to me. And I look forward to bringing you the next episode of Your Nurse Voice Matters. Bye for now, everyone.
See you later. Thank you.